Well, hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what is making the headlines with the Daily Mail's consultant editor, Andrew Pearce, and the Daily Mirror's associate editor, Kevin Maguire. Super to see both of you. Anyway, front pages as ever, let us kick off with the Metro reporting that legally binding COVID restrictions could end in as little as 2 weeks from now, with Boris Johnson expected to confirm the changes on February the 21st. Same story for The Guardian, their headline, COVID rules to be abolished in England in a fortnight. Meanwhile, at least 50 people are expected to be contacted in the coming days by Metropolitan Police officers investigating parties in Downing Street during lockdown. That's according to The Telegraph. Front of the Eye reports on the same story, writing that Boris Johnson and his wife will be questioned by the Met. 7 days to respond to formal questionnaires, adds The Times, as their headline with the same story. The front of The Sun, focusing on West Ham footballer Kurt Zouma's cats being rescued by the RSPCA after footage of him revealed he abused them. Financial Times has details of plans by America's fiscal regulator to improve transparency around hedge funds. And The Mirror has a story concerning the personal life of Colleen and Wayne Rooney, and of course that photo in Downing Street, which was broken today by Pippa Crerar. So a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us, listen to our guests. So let's bring them in. Andrew Pearce and Kevin Maguire, welcome to you. So, Kevin, let you kick off then, leading a number of the newspapers, this idea that if you test positive, you won't need to isolate, and it's coming in quite soon.
No, that's right. Guardian are leading on it. We were expecting the change March 24th, but it now looks like February 24th, brought forward in England by a month. The Prime Minister unexpectedly announced it to Prime Minister's questions. I suspect he wanted to change the news agenda away from parties to some extent. He's done that because we can see there it's at the front of the Guardian. And it also shores up his support amongst the rather large lockdown sceptic wing of his own party. Interestingly, Sage, the advisors, say they knew nothing about this. So has he got new scientific advice, or was it all about politics? It may be sensible, it may not. But it's interesting when you look at the figures that are still there. I was just looking at them today, 276 deaths announced. Okay, that's down. Cases, 68,000. That's down as well. Hospital admissions down, but 10,000 people still admitted in the last full week. 430 people still on ventilators. It's certainly a gamble, but I think the mood of much of the nation now, I think, is that they're fed up and they want to see the end of restrictions. Although that legal requirement to self-isolate for 5 days, should you test positive, I don't think it's particularly onerous compared to the restrictions we had in the past.
Yes, and that's certainly the argument that some people make. 5 days, possibly a sixth. It's not that bad. And how do you avoid getting it now? To be fair, Downing Street, as The Guardian is quoting here, will set out guidance, but confirm people would be advised to avoid going to work if they test positive for COVID, in the same way that if you have flu, you would not be expected to go and infect your colleagues. Yeah. But, at some point when the laws changed, children of positive households were being forced to go in. So if a child is positive, would they be expected to go to school? What happens to vulnerable teachers? There's so many questions about this, Andrew, for people.
I think people are just going to have to use their common sense, Anna, because why should governments prescribe how we behave if we get a heavy cold or the flu? Of course, most people should stay at home, but a lot of people don't, and I think it's really antisocial that they don't. If you've got the flu, by the way, you ain't going to go to work, because if you've got real flu, it flattens you. But I think this is a really sensible move. I think the fact that Sage didn't know about it means it is a political decision. It would have been agreed with the cabinet.
Andrew, just stop there a minute. What makes it sensible?
Because why? Because everything is going down. Number of hospital infections are down. Number of hospital admissions are down. The number of deaths are down. We've not had it. Omicron has never been anything like the Delta variant. It's time to get the country moving again. It's time to let the country start living with COVID. We've got to learn to live with COVID. That's been the advice for a long time now, and it's about time we did. It's sensible, and I'm glad he's getting on with it.
we are living with COVID. That's why most of the restrictions have gone. There was some mask wearing, for instance, on London transport. You'd be requested on the train. I was recently between London and Newcastle. Some shops will do it, but most of the big restrictions have gone. The reason you have isolation, if you have it, is you don't spread it. That's the idea. Now, if you lift that isolation and people will probably stop testing and they're going out to work, or they're just going to shopping, or they're going to football, or whatever, then it could take off again. That is the danger. I notice Labour has criticised the timing, saying he went Johnson to the House of Commons and said it, didn't really have anything else to say. Labour hasn't criticised the lifting, and there's a bit of a bind here for Labour. What do they do when these restrictions are lifted? Do they call for them to stay in place? I'm not sure they will. They'll be trying to weigh it up.
But there's a psychology to this, Andrew. There's a psychology to this. Let me just finish, if you don't mind. We've all been told to be petrified of this thing for ages. And there are certain cohorts in society who will continue to be petrified. You know, some people who are vulnerable have been in tears about this. And to give people no notice, to adjust to the idea that actually the person stood next to them in a shop, you know, may well be positive, and it doesn't matter, they're allowed out and about, all that sort of stuff, or how you keep your parents safe when, you know, all the way through. People need time to adjust to that, don't you think?
Well, they're getting 2 weeks to adjust. That's plenty of time.
But we've not had guidance.
I mean, how many more, Anna, how many more months do you want to lock this country down? We've been locked down for 2 years. We've
not
got
locked
to
down.
get on with it. We've got to live with it. I'm sorry you're paranoid about it, Anna.
How are you locked down right now? How are you locked down?
We moved on.
How are you locked down right now?
Well, of course, people are locking down because they have to shut down. They have to stay at home for 5 days if they go down. Even if they're not ill, they don't feel unwell. They didn't even know they'd got Omicron until they got a positive test. It's causing chaos in the NHS. It's still causing chaos in business. The economy's on its knees. Let's get back to normal.
Okay.
God, dear me. I think some people would like you locked up, Andrew. But
they should lock you up, Maguire. Labour Party are playing opportunism all over again. They were against the restriction. They were against Johnson relaxing the restrictions before Christmas, and Johnson was proved right.
Well, the Scottish government's asked for urgent clarification. Clearly, no notice given there either, which takes us to our next story.
Well, they can do their own thing. They've got their own government. They've got their own government. They've done their own thing the whole way through.
Yes, the mandating of rules, their suggestion is they might be extended by 6 months as well. So we'll watch and wait to see what they do. But in the meantime...
Well, she does her own thing anyway in Sturgeon.
This all happened in the House of Commons.
So does the Welsh First Minister.
This all happened in the House of Commons during Prime Minister's questions, when you could see the Tory backbenchers all checking their phones after Pippa Creer in the Mirror revealed yet another photograph of an event we already know about. We've already seen a bit of that tinsel in the photo. But what's the difference with this one? Is it the booze and the crisps, Kevin?
It's exactly that, because the Metropolitan Police decided not to investigate this quiz on the 15th of December in 2020, deeming it didn't pass a threshold. Now they're looking at it. It doesn't say they will investigate it, but it looks more of a party when you see that open bottle of fizz, when you see those crisps. The last picture had the Prime Minister, who was flanked by somebody wearing the tinsel, that person, somebody in a Santa hat. But it certainly sounded like a party to me, when, yes, some people joined from home, but others were in teams in Downing Street, teams like Hands First Place. Next slide, please. It was in that the kind of have a laugh at Chris Whitty in a nice way mood. But the Met, I think, clearly didn't have the photograph, because they've got 300 photographs they're looking at. But if they're now reviewing their decision not to investigate what would be the 13th party, a baker's dozen with an extra one added to the dirty dozen already under scrutiny, you could see Boris Johnson just isn't out of it. And if there are 300 other photographs that the police have, how many do others have? And I think it's very hard for him to escape this. He's got himself into a real mess by, one, saying there were no parties, then two, all the rules were followed, then three, he was incredibly surprised to discover there'd been parties, and then four, just sort of putting his hands up and saying, look, wait for an investigation, when he was shown to be at parties. And then fifth, starting to apologise for some of the parties in Downing Street. Is
Just stop
great
at
by not
five.
telling the truth.
You could carry on all night with that list.
I could, yeah.
But the whole point is the Met Police also.
In.
Yeah, the Met Police revealed some of their investigation. The PA copy on this reads: detectives investigating lockdown parties in Downing Street are to send out questionnaires to people believed to have taken part. Goodness me, we're talking about the potential demise of a British Prime Minister and his government, Andrew, and the way to investigate this is via a questionnaire.
Well, just to go back to the party, why I think that picture of the party is significant. We were in Tier 2 restrictions, and those Tier 2 restrictions did say you could not have a Christmas party or even a Christmas lunch. So that's why potentially the police may now investigate it after all. Now, what the police will do, they're going to send email questions to the 50 staff. And I think as a result of those responses, which are, you've got to answer them honestly, and if you don't, you're in trouble. I think they will then question people. That's the point. I think they're not. Yeah. I think it's like a sifting process, because Downing Street, we know, is a very big place. There's about 400 people work there at times. And I suspect the Prime Minister will get the email too. And if his response doesn't pass the police test, I imagine they'll interview him in the same way they interviewed Tony Blair. What would be interesting during the Cash for Honours investigation is, would they interview the Prime Minister under caution?
Well, the difference would be that Tony Blair was interviewed as a witness.
That's right.
Boris Johnson would, I suspect, be interviewed as a suspect, and that's why it could be under caution. But those fines you can get on the fixed penalty notices are between £200 and £10,000. They're now fearing in Downing Street those who are regular party animals and went to a lot could get multiple fines rather than just one. Byproduct of this could be they could raise a lot of money for rather straitened public finances. But the I are reporting that Boris Johnson fears more letters will go in, and there could be a coup against him if he gets a fixed penalty notice, which would be an extraordinary position if he is found to have broken the law and is actually fined when he is in power.
Yeah,
just quickly, you don't get a criminal. Just say you don't get a criminal record if you get a fixed penalty notice. But some people who've organised parties outside of Downing Street have been fined up to £10,000. Now, I don't think the Prime Minister's organised any of these parties, but as a guest, potentially he could get a fixed penalty notice, and then would he have to go?
Yes, it all depends on the date of the party compared to the law at the time, doesn't it? But we will see how that all comes out. Before the end of the week, officers will be sending out those questionnaires. Plenty more still to come. The Foreign Secretary touches down in Moscow. But what role might she play in de-escalating the Ukraine conflict? Back with that in just a moment. Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me now, Andrew Pierce and Kevin Maguire. Welcome back to both of you. So, to Liz Truss in Moscow, we asked the question before the break, what role will she play? And you see this photo and you just want to shout, Dr. Zhivago, don't you, to be fair, Andrew?
Look, do you know what? This is Mrs. Thatcher all over again. When Mrs. Thatcher went to Moscow in 1987, when she saw Gorbachev, she wore all these amazing aquascutum outfits, including Cossack hats. So we've seen Liz Truss on a tank, like Mrs. Thatcher, when she was racing against the German Chancellor Helmut Kohl. Here she is again, dressing like Mrs. Thatcher. She ain't Mrs. Thatcher. However, as the Foreign Secretary, she's over there to see Lavrov, her counterpart. Waste of time talking to him. He's got absolutely no clout, no influence whatsoever. The gangster Putin makes all the decisions, but it's a great photo opportunity for her, and she never misses a chance, does she?
But that's exactly the point. This is not about her. It's about the fact that large parts of the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov have been closed today by Russia, that the exercises in Belarus are due to start tomorrow, that actually this is looking extremely serious. And you know, there's a nice bit of posing in front of, you know, that part of Moscow. I can't see the whole photo. We've got her tweet, have we, to see it. Anyway, Kevin.
Anna, she's the Instagram secretary. She just likes to go and pose and dress up everywhere. I remember the old kids cartoon series, Mr. Ben, and go in one door dressed as a soldier and come out the next one as a firefighter. That is her. I mean, she's hired quite a few people to get our image. But Andrew says Lavrov has got no influence and clout. I think you could probably apply the same to Liz Truss, actually, as foreign secretary. She wants the top job, but she goes around posing, and look, going in front of a landmark to show where you are would be quite normal. But she just seems to put so much focus on this. She's not going to be heard. She's not going to be heard at all. I think we saw Macron sitting at the other end of that long table from Putin. He struggled to be heard. I think Johnson would struggle to be heard.
He had to shout, you mean?
Yeah, well, he did. Yeah, pass the jam. Pass the jam. How you got it?
You want to talk about the cats? You've got 20 seconds. We'll do it again later, but 20 seconds on the cats. And Kurt Zuma, West Ham. Andrew.
Too little, too late. Too little, too late. That man should not have been allowed to play on that football match last night. An absolute PR disaster for West Ham. I'm glad he's lost some sponsors. £250,000, 2 weeks' money, nothing to that footballer. He's disgusting. He's a bully. It's horrible what he did to those cats.